Welcome back to another episode of Psychocinematic. Today, my guest is Jane Wu. If you've been following my podcast for some time now, then you will remember her from one of the Blue Eye Samurai episodes. She was the supervising director. Jane has an insane portfolio of work and is super cool and has been gracious enough to come back on here to talk to me about her work on House of the Dragon as a storyboard artist for Season 2, Episode 4. So without further ado, here's Jane. Well, cool, Jane. Thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it. I just watched your episode Sunday night, season 2, episode 4, and it was really freaking good.
You have no idea how relieved Alan and I were because when we were planning this, he showed me this thing about that this sequence is called Dance of the Dragon, and it's a huge aspect of the book, and it's a huge kind of like it changes the whole entire world of Game of Thrones, House of Dragon kind of epic event was. This was like an epic event, right? And then he read for me the way it was written,
Hmm.
and then told me that there is a lot of fan expectations. So I was like, why did you tell me that? So going into it, it was knowing that one, we had to deliver in a emotionally satisfying way. And then also the other thing was technically, is it possible?
Hmm.
Right. So it's constantly writing those two lines. And with anything big I take on, I freak out for the first 3 days and calm myself down and go, all right, how do we break this down into bite-sized pieces so it doesn't just seem intimidating?
Hmm.
Right.
How are you breaking those up into segments? Like, what segments are you creating?
Aside from the beats of the story that are needed, the first thing I wanted to wrap my head around, which was always the personality of the dragons, even in Game of Thrones in 706, that's the first thing I asked was like, what are the personality of the dragons? Because if they're living things, they all should have certain behaviors. That's why in 706, when the dragons, there's a huge wide shot of the dragons sleeping, and as Tyrion and Khaleesi walk past them and they wake up, I had one of them, wake up and then like shake their heads like how dogs do when they wake up and just like trying to shake the sleepy out.
Hmm.
And I want to always give them a little character like that. So if anybody's listening to this and there's spoiler alerts, so when you kill a dragon, you can feel it a little bit more because you brought them to life and you gave them a character and you connected with them. So it was trying to figure out what were those characteristic moments that we could help to sell these living beings, right? And then we talked about the actual battle and the attack. And we wanted this to feel as real as possible. So we looked at a lot of nature, how animals do attack. That led us to bird of prey. And I started looking up a lot of bird of prey attacks. And mainly, I was really inspired by how eagles, I mean, they're such majestic characters. And to me, like these dragons are sort of like eagles on in the air. And so how eagles kind of approached each other and did this thing where their talons would lock and they would just go through a free fall, you know, free fall kind of playing chicken to see who's going to let go first.
Mm.
And I thought that was quite interesting. And also the velocity in which they kind of spin out of control. And at the last minute before they hit water or land, they just separate and fly up again and they repeat all this. And that seemed like a viable approach of the attack. And in the first attack with Aegon's dragon, you can see Malus like starting to do a barrel roll to start doing
Hmm.
this. So I wanted to interject that this is a typical move. And I wanted a sense of this is, with any battle, there is experience and there are maneuvers that you would take. So trying to sort of design that in beforehand so that when you see the dragons attack, you think, oh, okay, she's trying this maneuver again. The other thing was in the book, they talked about how when the dragons were fighting up in the air, it felt like a nuclear event in the sky.
Mm.
So again, part of the reason why I like the free falling motion is that in order to create fire in the sky, you would need a fireball. And the best way to do a fireball is if you had them free fall and they were spitting out fire at the same time. So you can create like these beautiful motion and fireball. And because it's also very awe-inspiring, beautiful at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going through logically of what these things needed helped me do the research and then helped me find the visual key elements for designing the sequence. I slowly calmed myself down afterwards.
It's funny that calms you down because I feel like that stresses me out more. The more things that you have to think about to, create this crazy sequence of events. And when I hear about the fireball in the sky and a nuclear like event, I think about budget. Like, does that have to like? What if you storyboarded something that they're like, we can't afford this? Is it just back to the drawing board or?
Yes, but I think I have enough experience into this to know how many shots we could do to achieve this, to get out of this, and to get our best bang for the buck, and no pun intended.
Mm-hmm.
The other shots that helped was, the actors on the buck when they
Mm-hmm.
were like coming out of control and you can see fire behind them. Like that's not as expensive. I mean, they're all expensive,
Mm-hmm.
but not as, animating a full dragon, right? I hadn't seen the final result and I watched it last night, holding my
Oh
breath.
wow.
I was very happy and pleased to see the result of it because it came out beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
Alan just rendered those shots so majestically. It was beautiful. Made me
Mm-hmm.
happy.
Yeah, I bet that it's got to be a nice sense of relief. I mean, the fact that you weren't able to watch that earlier is kind of crazy to me. Uh, but man, that's got to be scary.
Yeah, well, because I have a day job, so I didn't have
Yeah.
time to watch anything else.
Yeah. So you're talking about the birds of prey, and I'm curious with Aegon's dragon, was there any shark inspiration there? Because I felt like when we're first introduced to his dragon in that sequence, and you just see the wings over the forest, it felt like a shark's fin in the water. And then even later, when we just don't know where he's at anymore, and then he just kind of swoops up and takes out the dragon that was right there, feels like a
I,
shark attack.
well, I think in the script it had asked for something else and for him to be hiding in the cliff or something like that.
Hmm.
And we chose to not show you where he was because I think what we wanted to do was to give you the sense of confusion that Malus and Rhaenyra, right? What was that character's name?
I was hoping you were going to know because I get her name mixed up with Rhaenyra's.
I know this is why they have civil war because everyone's name is so familiar, so similar.
Yeah.
Okay. But with Malus and the princess on the dragon, we really wanted to be in with her, so you sense the level of confusion, right?
Hmm.
Because if you were in that spot and there was fire all around you, you're just going through a death spiral, and you were barely able to, pull out of that, you might have a sense of like, okay, where's everything? And that's why there was a shot of her looking around like, where am I? Where's everybody? Okay,
Hmm.
I'm about to take off. And that was a great way for us to kind of add that surprise element and have Vagar T-bone her right behind
Hmm.
the castle because, you know, we didn't need to know where he was. And yes, it was a very jaw moment, to have the shark come up and get him. But we thought that that surprise attack was a really good way to play the beginning of the end for Malus and the princess.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah. When you guys were storyboarding this, did you decide ahead of time on like some certain rules of like what the camera could and couldn't do
Yes.
for this? And what were those rules?
So it was early on that Alan was telling me that they went through a here's what worked in season one and here's what worked in Game of Thrones. And, it was all decided that we didn't want magic cameras to orbit around the dragons and so forth because it took out the sense of reality. So we always said that the camera has to be mounted somewhere. So the camera has to be mounted on another dragon, watching that dragon, or the camera has to be mounted on the dragon,
Hmm.
right? So those were the particular limitations of what we could do with cameras. And usually that's always a good way of shooting things that move, that make you feel more invested, that make you feel more connected to what you
Hmm.
were.
Yeah. I agree because I've seen that as like a big critique of. I think it was Pacific Rim.
Oh
Maybe
yeah,
they. I don't know. I think one of them, like the sequel, did the camera movements completely different, where they have the fake cameras or the magic cameras, and the other one had it more realistic, like only shots we could get in real life kind of thing.
right.
And they just give off completely different feelings.
Yeah, and I also viewed some, World War II dogfight documents and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
how that possibly would be viewed, because those are all real footage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and because House of Dragons really had to be grounded in that reality and trying to figure out how to take that filmmaking into a grounded reality.
Right. So I saw that picture that you put up, I think it was last night or maybe it was this morning, of you and Alan storyboarding on a whiteboard.
Yeah.
I'm curious, is that kind of how your storyboard process normally works? Like you with a whiteboard and a director? No?
No, that's particular because of how I work with Alan and
Hmm.
my relationship with Alan. When we're working on a project together, it's really living and breathing it almost every single day. So I brought the whiteboard home because I do have a day job. I was running Blue Eye Samurai at the same time, and then at night or on the weekends, I would then pick back up and start storyboarding for House of Dragons. So that meant a lot of breaking down scenes and shots over breakfast and lunch. And, instead of drawing on a piece of paper, I asked for the whiteboard to be there. So every time we talked about it, we could collect more and more talks about it and agree and have the director look at it and agree with what I'm doing because these are so labor intensive that you basically want to make sure that everyone agrees and everyone is thinking about the same thing. And I also made paper like origami dragons
Hmm.
to, kind of do this.
Yeah.
And we were using our phones and it kind of was a little bit hard. So
Yeah.
paper dragons and very low tech. And yeah, and it was just once we collected enough uh, beat information or shot information and I was comfortable with it, then I'd photograph it to make sure that, in case we erased it by accidents, I would have at least kind of like the marching orders of what to do
Hmm.
and also be able to put in, grocery list and things like that on the board.
Yeah. So you put it all on the whiteboard, you take the photo of it, and then are you going and hand drawing that, or are you using a
Yeah.
certain software?
No, so we would digitally storyboard it. I primarily use Photoshop to do that.
Hmm. I vaguely recall the first time you were on the podcast talking about working with Alan on Game of Thrones, and when you were storyboarding a certain part, it was in a snow scene, and they're like, "We can't get this kind of camera movement because of the location." And so I'm curious, do you now get access to the locations or maybe 3D renderings of what the location will look like so that you can kind of use that to gauge what's possible?
Yeah, so on Rook's Rest, that was an interesting location because we only had like one little part of it and you can only point the camera in two directions or something like that. And then the other stuff was all effects in. So there was some concept drawing and some maps to show us kind of where our sandbox is and what we could play with and
Hmm.
what the camera would look like, if you point it that way. So yes, and I think the part about what we were talking about Game of Thrones in Iceland was I'm a Southern California girl. I don't know snow, so it never dawned on me that you can't put a track on snow. I think that was
Hmm.
just a very particular example of me not knowing the environment. So very well in terms of like snow. But in this one, we had it was, grass. You can handle grass. And then everything was VFXed in. And mostly it was about, trying not to point the camera the other way because every time the Rook's Rest was looking at a tree line, that was a whole different location. And what
Hmm.
was hard was to connect both of those location into one shot.
So then you are worrying about things like the
Oh, sure.
composition and like leading lines and where they framed and all that.
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's 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 like juggling four different balls at once.
Hmm. And then you have to like, do you have to consider what the DP wants to do with that shot, or do you have to like start altering those storyboards based on like once other people get to see it?
No, my only concern is what the director wants because,
Hmm.
the director's vision, it's the director's show. He's responsible for it. So in the end, does this work for what the director needs?
Hmm. So when you're drawing the storyboards, are you also drawing it based on what lens you know is going to be in there? So like if you're shooting on a long lens, then are you drawing like background compression and that stuff?
I am. I
Hmm.
am, because I do know how to do that, and that's my thing. So I do try to capture it to lens. Yes.
Hmm. Gotcha. And so then that would be decided by you or you and Alan together for something like this.
Well, that's also our working relationship because I know the way Alan likes to shoot. I know his style. He trusts me. So normally I would, pitch him a shot, compose it, and then say, this is like a 60, right? His favorite lens. And he would go, yeah. And I say, okay. And I know what this is.
Hmm. Gotcha. And then on the storyboards, how are you depicting? Are you drawing this or do you just write it like what's in focus, what's out of focus?
No, that stuff the DP will do. And just
Okay.
because generally the way it looks and the way you have to frame it up and the way your character takes up certain part of the frame, they will lens up to the closest that needs, and then that automatically will be taken care of by the lensing. Now, on the flip side in animation, you do have to decide all that.
Hmm. Yeah, so I am working on making my own short film right now, and I just storyboarded like a week or two ago, but my drawings are awful. And honestly, it was like pulling teeth doing the whole film. And I was thinking about you storyboarding the episode and the sequence, and just like I'm definitely not cut out for that. But it got me thinking about like what makes a good storyboard versus a bad storyboard. Like, of course, I know what I'm intending with my storyboard because I'm the one who's going to shoot it. Um,
Right.
and so I'm just curious, like, what do you think separates the good from the bad?
I think a good storyboard artist can take directions. First of all, uh, know that, at the end of the day, the creative say lays with the director and not you, and that you are mainly a support for the director. Whether you like it or not, it's still the director's responsibility, right? You're helping to solve problems. And that leads to the second part is the ability to solve problems, whether it's a production problem, not enough shoot days, the set being limited, how to get around that, and also coming up with creative ways to do some, whether it's a physical stunt, whether it's business or what have you, to help forward the story. Those are things that make a storyboard artist good. Knowing how to draw well helps, but mainly if you can draw well and still can't do the other three, then that doesn't help either, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So I would say those are probably the main key things. Oh, then the other thing is being able to turn them around fast. That's a huge part of it, meeting your deadlines.
Yeah. How fast is fast for storyboards?
It depends because every production needs is different. So sometimes you do have to do all-nighters to get it done. Or sometimes if they say, we need 4 pages by tomorrow, and you're like, that is impossible. But how do you condense it? So like, okay, I'm not going to show you everything on this 4 page that you're looking for, but here are the major beats that turn this 4 page scene. And this is what I could get done in 4 days. And is this enough materials for us to talk about whether this works or not?
Hmm.
Right. Um, but it's knowing how to manage that expectation part of the process. It's knowing what the production needs.
Hmm. On this episode, were you the only storyboard artist, or was this just your sequence and you're amongst a bunch of storyboard artists for this
Alan
episode?
Alan had to hire another storyboard artist, and he mainly did work on episode one because I had so much work on episode four, I couldn't do one. Also, there
Hmm.
weren't a lot of dragon work on one. Uh, I think I predominantly did all of the storyboards for 204, and I think the other artist took like two small sequence or two shots,
Hmm.
dragon shots. But yeah, 204 was predominantly me.
Gotcha. So if we're talking about, like your fast turnaround time for that whole episode, about how long are you working on that?
It's a little bit hard to calculate because I had a day job. So I couldn't work on it 24/7. But what I did was we knew that this was coming up so far ahead of time. I started, you know, doing it piece by piece. I would say in the end, it should have taken me 3 weeks to do. Should have. So,
Hmm.
but it parceled out into 6 weeks, because I was working on it kind of like sandwiched between Blue Eye Samurai,
Hmm.
and it was hard.
I bet like that sounds exhausting. So you're just jamming that out after you leave Netflix or just on the weekends?
So I was in London with Alan the whole time,
Okay.
or 5 months of it, so that I could, visit set and be able to communicate with previs and so forth, and being able to sit with production team. I was able to work in the morning when LA was sleeping, and when LA woke up, I put down the dragon work and picked up Blue Eye Samurai and kept working,
Hmm.
and then
Dang.
picked up dragons on the weekend.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Uh, I just had a thought of, it doesn't seem like dragons exist in Blue Eye Samurai, but if they were going
Yeah.
to, you'd be the perfect person to add them.
Yeah, samurai dragons. Why not?
Yeah,
Should
maybe
pitch
a
it to.
spin-off.
Yeah.
As I recall from our last podcast together, you were also talking about how some directors, they have different relationships with the storyboard artist. Sometimes like they're there just to make sure the storyboard doesn't get lost, but then other times they're there on set to make sure that, things are following as close as possible all the way down to the lensing. Is that what your role was while they were shooting, or were you just not did you have to do more Blue Eye Samurai stuff so you couldn't really be on set for that stuff?
I was on set for a lot of the times. And this crew is so buttoned up. I'm not there to make sure, anything. In fact, just, to be an emotional support for Alan. Um, but when we were shooting the buck work, I know that one of the shots wasn't working, and we were able to revisit the storyboard and realize, oh, this is a locked off shot. This is not a, moving camera thing. So we changed it, and everybody was happier for it. So it is a luxury to have a board artist on hand because the board artist doesn't really have much to do on set once they're filming because your work has already been done. You're there for just in case moments.
With a just in case moment, are you actively redrawing something else and then saying, all right, how about that?
I can,
Hmm.
but these shots are so designed heavy, so designed and so already worked out that even if I draw it then and there, it still has to go through previs. So it's really an animation process.
Hmm. So when you worked on Game of Thrones with Alan, was that the first time that you guys had worked together?
No, no, that was much later. The first time Alan and I worked together was on Thor 2.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So you were a storyboard artist on that as well. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm curious, as a storyboard artist, what can make your job much harder? Like, do the
Indecisions.
indecision,
Indecisions makes my job harder.
and why is
Uh,
that?
Well, because if you with your own storyboards, you know exactly what you want, so you drew it, right? And what if
Hmm.
I was the director and you go, what do you want in the shot? I don't know. What are you gonna do? You would say, okay, how about this one? You show it and you're like, no, that's not it. Okay. Then it would just spin your head going, I don't know what you want. Just tell me
Hmm.
what you want. So indecisions for me is like death by a thousand cuts kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I always prefer to work with a director that knows what they want because time is money. The more you can't figure out what you want, the more times I have to do it, and then less time I have in my schedule to turn it around.
Yeah, I totally relate to that too. Just like as a freelance videographer, when I edit some people's stuff, even if it's just poor communication that then results in what clearly was indecision. Like if you knew what you wanted, you would have told me exactly what you
Yeah.
wanted.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
when people and look, it's not to say that you can't change your mind, but
Hmm.
at least there was a clear direction on, I think let's try it this way. Okay, let's try it. And you know what? It didn't work. That's a whole different bowl of noodles other than, I don't know. And
Hmm.
you know, as a director, when you're supposed to be spearheading everything and then the spearhead goes, I don't know which way to point, that worries me.
If we could talk about Blue Eye Samurai season 2 just a little bit. I didn't plan on asking any like super revealing questions because I'm sure I'll just be told no. I can't answer that. So you got made executive producer, right?
Yes.
Are
Yes.
you also still the supervising director?
We have a new supervising director. His name is Federico D'Alessandro. We all call him Rico, and he's a buddy of mine back from the Marvel days, and he is like all the most awesome scenes that you've seen from Marvel. He probably boarded that.
Hmm.
So I was finally able to lure him to come work with me here, and it's been such a pleasure working with him. We call ourselves the Wonder Twins, so it's like Wonder Twin powers activate. Uh,
Nice.
because last season it was just so overwhelming for me to do this many jobs to look after the production and then also to look after story that I really needed to split myself into two.
Hmm.
Rico was the perfect candidate, and he is my twin,
Yeah.
helping me with a lot of the story stuff and the previous stuff in season two. That means I can, you know, look after the production in a more 35,000 feet big picture way.
Is that your responsibility as an executive producer now?
It's really not any different than last year. They just gave me a bigger title to say thanks for all you've done and we appreciate you. But in reality, I'm still doing a lot of what I do last in the last season,
Hmm.
just with a lot more help, which is great.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that position. That's really cool. And I'm glad that you're getting that extra help. I saw that Brian Kessinger is no longer the lead character designer and that Emily Sasaki, who I think was just like, she also worked on the season or the first season rather. She's now the lead character designer. I'm just curious, is that product of the delay in renewing season 2 and then Brian just had other
No,
work?
no, Brian is now working at Imagineering,
Hmm.
and he's that is his dream job. And so after Blue Eye Samurai wrapped, he got a call, and he had told me early on that if he got the full-time position, he asked me if it's okay if he left. And I said that's the only reason you can leave. And he got it. And
Yeah.
being his friend, I was very excited for him because that was his dream job. But being a supervisor and somebody that runs the show, I'm like, oh my God, I do now.
Yeah.
But Emily is such a fantastic candidate. She did such a great job for us last season. She gets the style, she understands the cultural reference and so forth. So, elevating her into this position and really promoting from within is something that I really encourage.
Hmm. As far as like the rest of the team goes, were you guys able to keep most of the same team?
Yes and no. I would say out of all the people that ran season one, there were two people that didn't come back.
Hmm.
And one of them was my supervising previs, Earl Hibbert, because we are restructuring previs in another way. Also, he's off to looking for directing opportunities, but everybody else, yeah, is pretty much here.
Nice. Now that you're working on season two, is it safe to say like that your work schedule is like, you're calling it a day job? Is it still going to be super hard to do anything else on the side?
Probably. Like I said, my experience on House of Dragon, I don't think I would do that again. That was really hard. But Alan is my life partner, and we're so used to working with each other. We also know that we're a good team together. If he should take another big job, I don't know what to do because, he doesn't want to work with anyone else. And I know the
Hmm.
way he works, and we're very efficient together. So, well, I guess I have to try to get production in a smooth place before I can pick up any freelance work or help him in any other production.
Yeah. And so if your life for the next 5 to 10 years looked like making Blue Eye Samurai, would that be something that excited you, or is that like too long for you to want to stick with the one the one thing?
I I think that's the perfect way of setting yourself up for some kind of expectations you're not looking for. And in my career, I've always kind of let the universe guide me, because I never expected a second season from Blue Eye Samurai. Because
Hmm.
everybody says, oh, Netflix doesn't renew second season. And really, I thought, oh, okay, we made first season and it was a hit. People loved it. Great. I can go off and do other things. And I never thought we were going to get second season
Hmm.
because we were told that we had to do arcane numbers and data. And I was like, okay, fine. And I was prepping to, start looking for other work and things like that. So I was the first one that got called back to do second season. If the opportunity arises and there is more Blue Eye Samurai, I think that's fantastic news. But will I be involved or not? I don't know because I don't know what the universe, I don't know what this industry has installed for me. And I don't believe in pushing something. I believe in letting it organically happen.
Hmm. So what can you give away about season two of like maybe like what we can expect? Like, are there going to be the same amount of episodes, or are you guys trying to go bigger and like bloodier? Like, I don't know. Do you guys have like those kinds of things established that you are um, open to disclosing?
We're still in the tail end of development, so the scripts are still, not fully turned in. So I don't even know what's going to happen in the full season.
Hmm.
There's still a lot of budgets that still need to be discussed. So it's so early on that I can honestly tell you I'm not sure, but I know that we will still deliver in the fashion and the style that people came to expect from Blue Eye Samurai. We will have shocking moments. We will have really awesome action because
Hmm.
I'll make sure of it. Uh, and we'll make sure that, it's just beautiful and yummy to watch.
Hmm. So last question, right now, like what's been inspiring you? Like, is there a movie or a show that, I don't know, that you think stands out that's really caught your attention, or a book, or I don't know?
I tend to watch a lot of old films, and I can't remember what those old films are, but just to come back and revisit old films reminds me of basics. It's always
Mm.
back to the basics and back to foundations. That's inspiring to me. I've been doing a lot of cooking. I mean, that has nothing to do with it, but cooking inspires me. I think cooking helps me wrap my head around process,
Hmm.
and I love process. I'm going to Sundance, Asia, so that's pretty exciting.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's
so
cool.
Alan and I are going to Sundance, Asia. And I think that's going to be the first time for me to step into the Asian film circle and see how that's done. And I'm really looking forward to that and being inspired by that,
Hmm.
seeing Asian filmmakers and seeing independent films and how they do it there.
I've come to just this realization recently that I just really love Japanese and Korean films and TV shows. There's a part of me that really loves reading the subtitles now because it
Yeah,
forces me to, like, I have to be staring at the screen, otherwise I'm gonna miss something.
yeah,
There is like the catch 22 with that. With I feel like I can't remember the show as well because I can't take in all the visuals at the same time and like really process. I am reading dialogue, but I don't know. I like the way that they think. Like the Korean TV shows, like, you know, Squid Game got super popular, and I feel like that kind of opened the door for me to look into them more. But I just got done watching another one on Netflix called The Eight Show. I think it's called The Eight Show, or maybe it's The Eight Game. It's very Squid Game esque, but like it's just so dark, and I just feel like I don't get a lot of that with traditional American filmmaking or
Yeah.
TV shows as often.
Tonally, film and story is told differently across the world, and it's very, very interesting to watch what people are doing all over the world. And that's why, like, in my main staples of watching things, I'm always watching Asian dramas or Asian film. Oh, I know what I saw. I'm so late to the game of this, but Wandering Earth. It's a Chinese sci-fi film.
Hmm.
I was so blown away with it because I've never seen an Asian sci-fi film before. That's usually a Western thing. And the
Yeah.
fact that, you know, China did this sci-fi film, I mean, were there some things that were like going, oh, why'd you do that? Yeah, but as a whole, it was not an easy feat to pull off. And I thought they did it really, really well. And that made me so happy for the opportunity of seeing more people like me in sci-fi.
Hmm.
That was inspiring. So if you get a chance to see Wandering Earth.
Hmm.
Yeah, Wandering Earth was such a pleasure to watch.
Do you know what
Uh,
decade that came out, or maybe specifically year that came out?
yeah, it's just a couple of years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Wandering Earth. Maybe it's the same writer as Three Body Problem because
Hmm.
he does just write sci-fi, right?
Gotcha. I'm not sure. I started watching Three Body Problem, but it's really hard for me to finish anything right now with a newborn here. There was a
Oh,
massive thank
congratulations!
you. Yeah,
Not getting sleep.
he's 4.5 months old, and I had
Oh,
this crazy misconception that I was going to be able to just watch a ton of TV while I'm like holding him or something, but no, I can't focus. Can't.
no. And
So
you won't be sleeping until he's a year old.
yeah, that's basically how it's gone. I'm in love with sci-fi right now too, so I do want to see that Wandering Earth.
Yeah, I'm a huge sci-fi fan, and I hope to, you know, work on a sci-fi one day. But
Hmm.
was that was really inspiring, you know, to see people that look like me in a language that I can understand, and then sci-fi. You know, it's sort of like watching Black Panther and the whole Afro tech kind of thing, you know, that
Hmm.
like merging cultures and things like that is fresh because you normally don't see that stuff.
Hmm. I forgot that you can. Is it Mandarin that you can speak?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's really cool being able to watch it in the native
Yeah, I don't
language
need
and understand
subtitles.
it. Yeah. So you'll have a different experience with it for sure than I will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's cool. Like one of the guys in there speaks English, and so he flips from language seamlessly like we do in the household. So it's nice to
Hmm.
see a representation of two cultures like that.
When you said that you are into cooking right now, do you also pair that with the cooking TV shows? Like, do you watch Gordon
I
Ramsay or
don't.
anything like that?
No, I don't. Although recently I did also watch Taste of Things.
What's that?
It's a French movie about this couple that cooks. And it sounds so boring, but it was such a beautiful film. And again, the process of I heard a whole thing about it. They actually filmed them cooking the thing. They actually practiced cooking it, and then they would cook it on the take, and the whole entire take is shot while they're cooking it. So it wasn't like fake food and wasn't like set up for them. They actually cooked the food, and
Wow.
then later ate it. They were really eating the food. So I
That's
thought that
cool.
was, yeah,
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 that's a
that's
nice touch.
yeah. So knowing how to cook and knowing how hard that is and knowing all that stuff that you have to prep and get ready, to me, that was really exciting. And then the other thing is that because it was a period piece, the vegetables that were being shot had to be period correct
Hmm.
because all of our vegetables are all, you know, GMO and they're much bigger. And
Hmm.
so they had to then plant everything months up ahead so that they can shoot those shots of them pulling the carrots out of the soil and then using it. So I find
That's
that all
crazy.
fascinating.
Yeah, that's crazy. The lengths that people will go to for that authenticity and like, but
Yeah,
once you hear about that stuff, it just makes it that much more special.
yeah, and that's why, because I love to cook and I love period, I was like, oh, I gotta watch this. And that was it was and then, just to watch the way they talk about it's a French film, so the French really know how to talk about food. It was just so amazing.
Well, Jane, thank you so much for making the time to do this. It was really fascinating hearing about your work on 204 and then also hearing a little bit about behind the scenes for Blue Eye Samurai season 2. I really appreciate you, dedicating the time.
Thank you for having me on, and this was a wonderful twofer.
Hey, yeah.
Yeah, it's always a
Oh,
pleasure talking to you.
I think you're the second guest being on for the second time, but yeah, that's cool. I hope to have you on again once season 2 comes out.
Yes, and
That'd
you
be
will hear
awesome.
about it.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much.
And congratulations with your baby.
Thank you.